I'm Francis, and let me tell you, growing up in my parents' house in a small Ohio town felt like living under a magnifying glass, every move watched, every mistake judged. My folks were the kind of people who cared more about what the neighbors whispered at church than what was happening under their own roof. My dad, a high school principal with a permanent frown, ran our house like a classroom. All rules and no room for error. My mom wasn't much different. She'd fuss over the hem of my skirt or the way I laughed too loud, always muttering, "What will people think?" My older sister, Chloe, was their golden child. She aced every test, volunteered at the community center, and never stepped a toe out of line.
Me?
I was the wildfire they couldn't tame. I'd slouch at the dinner table just to see how long it'd take Dad to snap. "Francis, sit up straight. A lady doesn't slouch." I'd roll my eyes, straighten up for a second, then sink right back down when he turned away. It wasn't just rebellion, it was survival. Their rules felt like chains, and I was always looking for a way to break free. I dreamed of studying marketing, moving to a big city, and building a life where I could breathe. But in that house, dreams like that felt like secrets you had to hide. When I was 17, I met Paul. He was 20. A college sophomore with a crooked smile and a knack for making me feel like I was the only person in the room. He was everything my parents would hate, laid back, charming, and not from our approved social circle. We kept it quiet, sneaking out to meet at the old park by the river, where the willows hid us from prying eyes. For the first time, I felt like I was living for me. I'd lie in bed at night, picturing us in a little apartment somewhere, me in college, him cheering me on. It was naive, sure, but it was mine. A few months after my 19th birthday, everything changed. I started waking up nauseous, blaming it on exam stress or bad diner food. But deep down, I knew something was off. One morning, I slipped into the gas station bathroom on my way to school, clutching a pregnancy test I'd bought with trembling hands. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead as I waited, my heart pounding so loud I could barely think. Then there it was, 2 pink lines. Positive. I took 5 more tests that week, hiding them in my backpack like contraband. Everyone said the same thing. I was pregnant. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My mind spun with questions. How would I finish school? What would Paul say? What about my parents? I avoided Paul for days, dodging his calls until I couldn't anymore. We met at our spot by the river, the air heavy with summer heat. He grinned when he saw me, but his face fell when he noticed my hands twisting together. "Francis, what's wrong?" he asked, reaching for me. I stepped back, hugging myself. "I'm pregnant," I said, the words spilling out like they'd been choking me. The silence was suffocating. Paul's face flickered, shock, then fear, then something colder. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice tight. I nodded, tears burning my eyes. 6 tests. All positive. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "You need to get rid of it, Francis. An abortion's the only way. We're too young. This'll ruin everything." His words hit like a slap. This was Paul, the guy I'd spent nights dreaming about, telling me to erase our baby like it was a mistake to be fixed. "Get out," I whispered, my voice shaking with rage. "Just go." He didn't argue. He walked away, leaving me alone under the willows, my world crumbling. Telling my parents was worse. I waited until after dinner. When Dad was in his armchair with a newspaper, Mom was wiping down the kitchen counter, and Chloe was lingering nearby, probably sensing trouble. My hands were clammy, my voice barely steady. "I need to tell you something," I said. Dad lowered his paper, his eyes narrowing. "What is it, Francis?" I swallowed hard. "I'm pregnant." The room exploded. Dad's face turned crimson as he shouted about disgrace and failure. Mom burst into tears, wailing about the neighbors and the church. Chloe just stared, her lips curled in disgust. "You'll get an abortion," Dad said once he'd calmed enough to speak. "We'll find a clinic. No one needs to know about this mess." I wanted to scream, to tell them it wasn't that simple, but their anger was a wall I couldn't break through. A few days later, I was in a cold doctor's office, Mom and Chloe flanking me like sentries. The doctor, a woman with kind eyes, reviewed my chart and frowned. Francis, she said softly, because of your medical history, an abortion could mean you'll never have children again. Her words landed like a punch. Never have children again. I looked at Mom, expecting some kind of softness, but her face was stone. Chloe just sighed, like I was an inconvenience. In that moment, something in me snapped. No, I said, my voice steady for the first time. I'm keeping the baby. Mom gasped. Chloe rolled her eyes. But I didn't care. I wasn't letting them decide my future anymore. The drive home was silent, the air thick with tension. When we walked in, Dad was waiting, arms crossed. Well, he demanded. She refused, Mom said, her voice dripping with frustration. Dad's face twisted. He took a deep breath, then spoke, his voice like ice. Pack your things and get out. You're not our daughter anymore. We won't have you shaming this family. Mom nodded, her eyes hard. Chloe didn't even look at me. I ran to my room, tears streaming, and stuffed clothes into a duffel bag. As I reached the door, Dad's voice stopped me. Don't come back. You're dead to us. The door slammed behind me, the sound echoing like a gunshot. I was 19, pregnant and alone. Standing on the sidewalk outside my parents' house, my duffel bag at my feet, I felt like the ground had vanished beneath me. The Ohio night was humid, crickets chirping as if nothing had changed, but everything had. I had nowhere to go, no plan, just a growing panic in my chest. Then I thought of Aunt Maggie. She and Uncle Ray lived a few hours away in Columbus, running a small bakery and always seeming like the odd ones out in our family. They'd never cared much for my parents' obsession with appearances. I dialed her number, my hands shaking so bad I could barely hold the phone. Francis, sweetie, what's wrong? Aunt Maggie's voice was warm, like a hug through the line. I broke down, sobbing as I told her everything, Paul, the pregnancy, my parents kicking me out. There was a long pause, and I braced myself for rejection. Where are you right now? She asked. Outside their house, I said, my voice small. Stay there. We're coming to get you. I sank onto the curb, relief mixing with fear. What was I going to do with the baby? How was I going to survive? The drive to Columbus felt endless, the headlights cutting through the dark as Uncle Ray drove and Aunt Maggie kept glancing back to check on me. Their house was small, a cozy brick bungalow with a front porch cluttered with potted plants. Inside, it smelled like fresh bread and cinnamon, a stark contrast to the sterile perfection of my parents' home. Aunt Maggie wrapped me in a quilt and handed me a mug of tea. You're safe here, she said, brushing hair from my face. Uncle Ray carried my bag to a spare room, a tiny space with a twin bed and a faded quilt. It's not much, he said, setting the bag down, but it's yours. I looked around, my throat tight. It's perfect, I whispered. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Aunt Maggie dragged me to doctor's appointments, making sure I was healthy and the baby was okay. She'd chatter about her bakery, her customers, anything to keep my mind off the fear. Uncle Ray, quieter but just as kind, would slip me extra pancakes at breakfast, winking like it was our secret. One night at dinner, as we sat around their scuffed wooden table, Aunt Maggie cleared her throat. We've been thinking, she said, glancing at Uncle Ray. We want to help you keep going with school. I blinked, confused. What do you mean? Uncle Ray leaned forward, his hands folded. We've saved some money over the years. Never had kids of our own, so we'd like to use it to get you through college. I stared at them, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth. College felt like a dream I'd buried the moment those two pink lines appeared. I don't know what to say, I stammered. Aunt Maggie smiled, her eyes crinkling. Say yes, Francis. We believe in you. This baby doesn't mean your dreams are over. I nodded, tears spilling over. For the first time since that gas station bathroom, I felt like I wasn't alone. I enrolled in a community college in Columbus, majoring in marketing like I'd always wanted. It wasn't easy. Morning sickness hit hard, and I dragged myself to classes feeling like I'd been run over. To help out, I got a job as a waitress at a local diner where the owner, Carla, took me under her wing. She was a no-nonsense woman with a quick laugh, and when I told her I was pregnant, she just nodded. Been there, kid. I'll work around your schedule. The tips weren't great, but they let me chip in for groceries and start a small savings for the baby. As my belly grew, so did my determination. I'd lie awake at night, one hand on my stomach, promising the little life inside me that I'd be enough. I'd make it work. I had to. The day Caleb was born, I thought my heart might burst from fear, from joy, from everything. After hours of labor, I held him in my arms, his tiny fingers curling around mine. He was perfect, with big curious eyes and a soft coo that made the world feel right again. Aunt Maggie and Uncle Ray stood nearby, grinning like they'd just won the lottery. "What's his name?" Aunt Maggie asked, her voice soft. I looked down at Caleb, asleep against my chest. "Caleb," I said. "It means faithful. Because no matter what anyone says, I know I made the right choice." Life as a mom was a crash course in chaos. Caleb's cries woke me at all hours, and I'd stumble through diaper changes half asleep, then rush to class with formula stains on my shirt. The diner became my second home, where I'd balance trays of coffee and burgers while memorizing marketing terms in my head. Carla was a godsend, letting me swap shifts when Caleb had a fever or I had an exam. There were days I wanted to give up, when the weight of it all, school, work, motherhood, felt like it would crush me. But then Caleb would smile, or Aunt Maggie would leave a note on my desk saying, "You've got this," and I'd keep going. I graduated college on a sunny afternoon, my cap slipping as I crossed the stage to grab my diploma. In the crowd, Aunt Maggie and Uncle Ray were cheering so loud I could hear them over the applause. Caleb, perched on Uncle Ray's shoulders, waved a tiny hand, his grin matching mine. At the graduation party they threw at the bakery, surrounded by balloons and homemade cupcakes, Carla pulled me aside. "Francis, I've got an offer," she said, her eyes twinkling. "I need a new manager for the diner. You're the one I want." I laughed, stunned. "Me? I'm just a waitress." She shook her head. "You're more than that. I've seen you handle cranky customers, organize the staff, and juggle a kid and school. That's manager material." The job was a game changer. Better pay, steady hours, a chance to use my marketing degree to boost the diner's business. Caleb and I moved into a small apartment near the bakery, and for the first time, I felt like we were building something solid. That's when I met David. It was at one of Caleb's Little League games, where he was swinging at pitches with more enthusiasm than skill. David was there with his son, Lucas, who played for the other team. We got to talking, and I was drawn to his quiet kindness, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about Lucas. "Single dad?" I asked, noticing he was alone. He nodded, a shadow crossing his face. "Widow, actually. Lucas's mom passed when he was a baby." My heart ached for him. "I'm sorry," I said. "Single mom," I added, gesturing to Caleb. He smiled. "It's tough, but we manage." David and I took it slow. We'd both been burned, him by loss, me by betrayal. But over coffee dates and playground meetups, I fell for his patience, his dad jokes, the way he'd high-five Caleb after a game. Caleb adored him, and Lucas, a shy kid with his dad's kind eyes, started calling me Miss Francis. One evening, in David's backyard while the boys chased fireflies, he took my hand. "Francis, I want us to be a family," he said, pulling out a simple ring. I said yes before he could finish, my heart full. Our wedding was small, just Aunt Maggie, Uncle Ray, a few friends, and the boys. Caleb, proud as ever, carried the rings, and Lucas held my hand as we said our vows. A year later, we welcomed Mia, our daughter, born on a crisp spring morning. Holding her, with David, Caleb, and Lucas crowded around the hospital bed, I felt whole in a way I'd never imagined. Blood didn't matter. Lucas was as much my son as Caleb and Mia. We were a family, messy and loud and perfect. Life with David, Caleb, Lucas, and Mia was a beautiful kind of chaos. School runs, baseball games, and Mia's endless giggles filling our home. But one evening, as Aunt Maggie helped with the kids, a news segment stopped me cold. There was my dad, grayer but still stern, standing at a podium, the ticker reading, Councilman John campaigns for mayor. He was preaching about family values, his voice smooth as ever. Aunt Maggie's face twisted with anger. Hypocrites, she muttered. I turned to her, confused. What do you mean? She sighed, her eyes heavy. There's something you need to know, Francis. She told me a secret that shook me to my core. Before Chloe and I were born, my parents had a son, Mark, born without legs. Ashamed of his disability, they left him at the hospital, erasing him from their lives to protect their perfect image. I felt sick, shock, sadness, and a deep ache for the brother I never knew. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice trembling. Aunt Maggie's eyes filled with tears. I didn't want to hurt you more after what they did to you. That night, I lay awake, David's arm around me, and made a decision. I had to find Mark. With David's support, we hired a private investigator. Weeks later, we got a lead. Mark was alive, living in Chicago, a motivational speaker and author adopted by a loving family. Meeting him was surreal. He rolled toward me in his wheelchair, his smile warm, his face somehow familiar. I always knew I had a family out there, he said, hugging me. I just never thought I'd find a sister. We talked for hours, sharing stories of our lives. His wife, Anna, and their 2 kids welcomed me like I'd always been part of them. Mark became a regular in our lives, his laughter filling our home alongside Caleb, Lucas, and Mia. Years passed in a blur of milestones. Caleb starting college on a baseball scholarship, Lucas finding his passion for art, Mia learning to read. One afternoon, scrolling through my phone, I saw a post from Chloe. Thrilled to announce Paul and I are engaged. The photo showed her beaming, arm around Paul, the same Paul who'd left me pregnant and alone. My stomach churned with anger, betrayal, but then I looked at Caleb, sketching at the kitchen table, and felt a quiet strength. I didn't need their approval. My family, David, the kids, Mark, Aunt Maggie, Uncle Ray, was enough. One quiet afternoon, a news article caught my eye. My dad, now a city councilman, in an interview about family values. I clicked, curious despite myself. He spoke smoothly, but then the interviewer asked about his kids. His face softened, a practiced look I knew too well. I have one daughter, Chloe, he said. We lost another child, a tragedy we carry every day. I froze, rage simmering. Lost me? He'd throw me out, erased me, just like Mark. Days later, Mark called. I'm doing a book signing in our hometown next week, he said. It'd mean everything if you came. I agreed, a plan forming. Walking into the grand ballroom of the town's fanciest hotel felt like stepping into a memory. The room buzzed with local bigwigs, business owners, council members, my dad front and center, now campaigning for mayor, with Mom and Chloe beside him. They didn't see me as I slipped into a back seat, my heart hammering. Mark rolled onto the stage, his presence commanding, and the crowd clapped. He spoke about his book, his life, his disability. I was born without legs, he said, his voice steady. My biological parents abandoned me at the hospital, too ashamed to keep me. The crowd gasped. I watched my dad, but his face stayed blank, a politician's mask. Then Mark smiled, his eyes finding mine. But that's not the end. I found my sister, Frances, and she's here today. Frances, come up. The room buzzed as I walked to the stage, feeling every eye on me. My parents' faces drained of color, Chloe's mouth dropped open. They knew what was coming. I took the mic, my hand steady despite my racing heart. Mom, Dad, please stay, I said as they shifted to leave, my voice carrying. It's time for the truth. I told the crowd everything, how my parents abandoned Mark for his disability, how they kicked me out at 19, pregnant and alone, to protect their image. When I refused an abortion that could have left me infertile, they called me a disgrace. I said, my voice strong. They talk about family values, but they abandoned 2 of their kids. The room erupted, gasps, shouts, reporters scribbling. My dad shrank in his seat, Mom sobbed, Chloe stared, frozen. I locked eyes with my dad, the man who'd once loomed so large, now small and exposed. The story spread like wildfire. Local news, then national, tore apart my dad's campaign. He resigned within days, his career in ruins. The school where he worked cut ties. Chloe called once, her voice venomous. "You've destroyed us," she spat. "You're dead to me." I hung up, her words stinging but not breaking me. Then Paul called, his voice tentative. "Julie and I can't have kids," he said. "We have Caleb. Maybe we could be a family." I laughed, bitter but free. "You made your choice years ago, Paul. I have a family and it's not you." I hung up, the weight of him finally gone. A day later, Paul's mom, Diane, called. "Is it true about Caleb?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Do we have a grandson?" They'd been told I'd had an abortion, lied to by Paul and my parents. I hesitated, then agreed to let them meet Caleb. It was emotional, tears, hugs, years of missed moments. Caleb, always big-hearted, welcomed them. Life settled into a new rhythm. Mark and his family became our regulars, Aunt Maggie and Uncle Ray doting on all the kids. My parents and Chloe faded, moving away to escape the scandal. Part of me pitied them, but I'd done what I needed to, told the truth. To everyone who's followed this journey, thank you. You've walked with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and the fight to rebuild. If my story hit you, hit that subscribe button and join us. Every scar tells a story of resilience, love, and truth. Keep fighting for your own truth, and I'll see you at the finish line.